agenda, minutes of the last meeting held on the 11th of November. Are you happy that I sign those as a correct record? Thank you. Item number 2, can we note the change in membership with the replacement of Councillor Steve Carr with Councillor Daniel Williamson, who you should be able to see behind Councillor Payne, but I can't see him at the moment. But that is a permanent change. Can we move to item 3, apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Henry for other reasons, and Councillor Anne Callaghan is substituting today. And we also have Councillor Helen Ann Smith sends apologies for other reasons, and Councillor Andy Meakin is due to substitute. I think Councillor Williamson was going to update, but and Councillor Daniel Williamson, is that correct?
Yeah, Daniel's not very well. He's quite poorly, so that's why he's not here.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We accept those apologies. Item number 4, any declarations of interest by members and officers? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Right, I think generally, if I can do it on their behalf, the Rushcliff members, or the members from Rushcliff, are declaring a non-pecuniary interest in the item on the Rushcliff boundary review. It seems a sensible thing to do, just so that it's perfectly transparent. So that is a general declaration. Councillor Payne.
I don't think it requires a declaration, Chairman, but I take your advice and the monitoring officer's advice. There is an item 8, that references the CDF. I know we're not talking about individual applications at this stage, but we obviously all as elected members do have a divisional fund that we allocate in our divisions. And so for transparency purposes, I think it is just worth putting that on the record, given that we are having a conversation about how it operates.
I don't think you need to formally declare an interest, but appreciate you just raising the issue, Councillor Payne.
Yeah, thanks for that. I never entered my head, I must say, on that one.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. Okay. If we're all happy, then can we move on to item number 5, which is the update on the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman's decision. And you have that report in front of you. And I'm going to move the recommendation on page 9.
I'll formally second that recommendation and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moxon. I'm going to ask Joe Kirby and Richard Elston to say a few words before I throw it open to discussion.
Thank you, Chair. I'll speak because I wrote the report and Richard's here for his own learning, really. So the report is one that you're used to receiving in terms of Ombudsman's decisions. The total number of decisions in the period was 8, and they're all detailed in Appendix A. 3 cases were not investigated by the Ombudsman, and 5 cases had a full investigation, and 2 of those no fault was found. 3 fault was found, and they're all in adult social care and health, and colleagues, senior colleagues from that department are here to answer any specific questions. The one thing I will add that to update you, since I prepared this report, the case involving where fault was found involving us, the council and health, the Ombudsman has satisfied himself that all the remedies recommended have been concluded and has written to confirm that that's the case. I have to provide evidence to the Ombudsman of what we've done in any case that's found fault. So it might be helpful for you, Chair, and the committee to know that that's the case.
Right, thank you. It seems to me yet again that the failure is one in communication or lack of communication, and this is a recurrent theme. And I find this particularly disappointing now, as this committee has drawn repeated attention to that. The Ombudsman makes point of saying that, in effect, the frontline work that we do is good and generally finds no fault, apart from the lack of funding. I think that is perhaps a frontline issue, but the real issues stem from poor communication. And if you look through the report, you can see that is reiterated time and time again. And again, as I say, I find that disappointing. On page, on the first one, the first complaint, there was a lack of clarity and clear communication around the management of direct payments. The failure to do this was fault. On the second one, we find a similar situation. It is recognised it had delayed responding to the complaint. However, its care package meets his assessed needs, but we had delayed in responding. And at the bottom of page 14, it took, this is the clinical commissioning group, another 5 months to respond. At the top of page 15, paragraph 76, it should have, this is the council, it should have sent its second and final response within 20 working days. However, it took 10 months. Now, you can't blame COVID for that, I'm sorry. You know, it could be a couple of months maybe, but 10 months when it should have been done in 20 working days. And I find that not just disappointing, I'm getting increasingly annoyed about it. And because of the circumstances that we have, I did initially request that officers appear before us in person. But of course, with the change in arrangements, it was felt it was inappropriate at this stage to do that. But if this continues, I will expect them to come in front of us. At the bottom of page 17, delay in providing minutes. The council interviewed Mrs. X in September 2020. However, it failed to provide her with the minutes of this interview until it responded to her complaint the following March. And it goes on, and it doesn't seem to get any better. Members, what are your views? Councillor Payne.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Let me just start by saying thank you to Jo and her team for a comprehensive report, which I think makes it easier for members to then pose questions and hold members of staff to account. And thank you, Jo, for the work that your team does in this regard as well. I just concur with you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, focusing in on the 3 cases where the council and/or partners we were working with were found at fault. The 3 individual issues are incredibly serious. One was a safeguarding investigation. One was jointly funded care package between ourselves and the clinical commissioning group. And one was in relation to a close member of her family's concern about her own mother's care and financial assessment. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Mr. Chairman. There's a serious risk, I think, that is emerging, an emerging pattern over the last few meetings we've had, which is that 2 out of the 3 of these cases where we were found at fault can clearly be put down to poor communication or complaint handling where there was criticism. I think you're right to say, Mr. Chairman, that it's not necessarily in reference to the service being provided, but the way in which we respond, which can cause equal amount of concern, angst, upset for those people who are involved. And if I may, I think there is not only a reflection for the immediate team about what measures are going to be put in place to rapidly improve communication in that area and make sure that we are responding in a timely fashion and that our complaints are being dealt with appropriately. But I also think there's a broader question for the council about allocation of resources, because we've heard recent conversations this week about money being piled into communications to make sure that the council can talk about shiny new projects that it's investing in. But at the moment, we're not even getting the basics, the bread and butter issues right, which is responding to people's complaints. And I think you're right to be frustrated, Mr. Chairman. I think you're right to be annoyed about the pattern that seems to be emerging in this. And I think what this committee now needs to see is not just a reactive response to the individual complaints, which is where we seem to be in each individual meeting, but very clearly set out what the council, not just the complaints team, but what the council more broadly is planning to do going forward about both tackling the issues around poor communication, and some of that might be about a need for additional resource, but some of it might be about actually how our comms team or the comms resource around complaints is structured and works. But the second element, critically, about complaint handling, because I think, as you rightly said, Mr. Chairman, to not have taken a record and share that record of a meeting that was talking about some pretty serious issues seems to me, you know, the most basic things that should have been got right. So what I would certainly want to see, and I think this supports what you've said, Mr. Chairman, is, and I know this is not going to happen in today's meeting, but in pretty quick order, what is the council more broadly going to do about making sure that there is appropriate comms resource and appropriate processes so that this pattern ends and that we see a reduction in these investigations and certainly a reduction in these issues referencing complaint handling and communications?
Yeah, thank you. I think this is the message. You say it can't happen today. Well, no, it can't. But I think the spirit of what has been said can be fed back to the Adult Social Services Committee. And I think in a large part, it is up to them to come up with a plan of action. And it might be that going forward, we will ask to see any such plan of action and comment on it. Yeah, would that satisfy the short term?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
I don't know what the formality is in sending a note to another committee, but that will be done in whatever format we think appropriate.
I mean, the recommendation, Mr. Chairman, on our report is about, you know, what views we would have. So I hope that we can find some appropriate wording to make sure that is reflected in our recommendations.
Yeah, I think we can leave that to officers.
Yeah,
We've got, you know, we're in broad agreement, and the spirit of what has been said will be recorded and reflected in the minutes. However, I think at this point we would like to hear from Adult Social Services as to what they've got to say about it. So I don't know who's going to speak to us.
Thank you, Chair. I'll go first and pick up the cases that are set out at paragraph 9 and 10, and then hand over to Ainsley. So the first one, which related to financial contributions and responsibilities, and it is a complex area, and it's understandably one that we do seek to get right because it's a very key area for people. We were already aware that there was ways to improve our communications before this complaint, and we've been working with people who use services and are systematically going through all our letters and the things that we send out to make sure that they are clear and set out what people need to know. In this incident, looking at what happened, there was a delay, and for that we apologise. It was at a time when we had almost double the work because all our contributions systems were transferring from one to another. So it was in that context of a very high amount of work, and we have reviewed the processes, and one of the concerns was that the payments of the direct payments stopped to the person while this was resolved. The process has been changed so that if there is an issue and there is a difference of opinion between the council and the person managing someone's money, then we don't stop the payment. We seek to resolve it without stopping the payment, and then any contribution that needs to be backdated, we'd work out with the person what is a reasonable payment plan. And just by way of context, we do support at any one time around 9,000 people, and many of which will be having negotiations around their financial contributions. So just to give some of the scale of the work we do, and I know that for every person and every individual where there's a delay and confusion, that is serious, but just to say that in the vast majority of cases, we do get it right. Regarding the complaint at paragraph 10, this was very much, there was a long delay, and myself and the workers sincerely apologise for that. The context was it was a time when instead of myself having 5 senior managers that oversee complaints, we had a sustained period of time due to ill health where we only had 3. So that meant that people were covering each other's areas, and it did lead to some confusion over who was picking this up. And so what we've done is we've put in place a system whereby we can keep better track of those so that it doesn't recur. However, in both of these, the actual services to people, as has already been pointed out, the practice and the services and the decisions were correct. So it was that the communication error that's been delayed, but it didn't leave anybody at risk or at harm. I'll hand over to Ainsley to talk about the third case.
Thank you, Sue. So in relation to the third case, this concerned a safeguarding investigation into potential financial abuse. This case did take a significant amount of time to investigate. We have apologised for that. However, what I would say, I know that our policy states that investigations will take 4 weeks, but the reality is that often safeguarding investigations do take much longer than 4 weeks to conclude. However, we have apologised and made financial payment in recognition of that. In relation to not sending the minutes to Mrs. X until she raised a complaint, there's no reason why the minutes shouldn't have been sent out. I think one of the difficulties is that whilst people have been working from home, they don't have the same access to admin support. So, it does have an impact on some of our mail in and out. However, I accept that, we should have sent the minutes as soon after the meeting as possible. And in terms of the final point within the Ombudsman's report, it was felt that we should have included the housing provider in the investigation, which we had taken the decision that it wasn't necessary to do so. However, the Ombudsman felt that we should have done that, and we are looking into whether they could have provided any relevant information, and if so, would that have changed the outcome?
Thank you. I fully accept that safeguarding investigations can take much longer than the number of days that are prescribed in the policy. But surely, if that is going to be the case, we would send out a letter to say we cannot give you a detailed response to the complaint or to the issues within the approved timescale because we're having to look further. And that seems to me to be standard practice, that you would just do that as a matter of course if something was taking longer than would normally be the case. And as far as sending out the minutes are concerned, even if people are working from home, this wasn't a matter of days, it wasn't a matter of weeks, it was a matter of months. Yes. So there really is no excuse. Any other comments from members? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Really, just to echo what you and colleagues are saying, it does seem very ironic, doesn't it, in this day of super fast communications, instant communication, and all the rest of it, whether it's on the phone or the email or whatever, that delays like this are happening. But I do understand the pressures that teams are under, but I won't go over the ground of saying how unacceptable it was. But perhaps something we all need to keep in the back of our minds, and this probably applies to us all, whether we're members or officers, because we sometimes get a bit used to what we're doing, is in cases like this, perhaps have a little mantra or thought going through your mind, and that is put yourself in the position of the person who's got the grievance, got the complaint, who will not necessarily be familiar or indeed interested in how the council works and how the authority works. All they want is they've got a complaint. Usually they're acting as on behalf of someone who is in a difficult place for social care and all the rest of it. So, and I'm not saying this doesn't happen, but let's just sometimes just remind ourselves while we're all here, and that is just sort of have a little bit of empathy for the Joe Public out there or whoever it is who's found the need, rightly or wrongly, to make a complaint to the Ombudsman. Keep it simple.
Yep, thank you for that, Councillor Butler. I think that's hit the nail on the head. Councillor Upton.
Yes, just briefly, Chairman. Over my working career, I investigated many complaints, and 9 times out of 10 it was poor communication. So I absolutely get it. It's the communication part of it. I, at the moment, are waiting for some communication from the building control on an application, and it's 3 weeks now. I've heard nothing. So as the weeks go by, I naturally, as a part of my human behaviour, get a little bit frustrated and think, well, if they only sent me an email to say, sorry, overworked, on ill, whatever the reason, then I would accept it more than being left totally unaware of what's happening. So it's about communication. When you work in a big housing authority, as I've done in London, where you're talking of thousands, tens of thousands of building repairs and maintenance, and I take the point from the officer, I think she said there were 9,000 live cases or whatever. You can get automated systems on the computer that flag up after 1, 2, 3, 10 weeks or whatever you want to tell you as an officer, do something. And the do something is very easy in this day and age if you're on email with your client, because you just, I'm sorry, you know, whatever reason you want to give, we're still working on it. And at least the person knows that they haven't been abandoned or forgotten. And I think they're more receptive not to make a complaint. You are communicating with them. Those systems are available. So if they're not there, perhaps you could look into that. The ones that aren't on email, then yes, you're in the hands of the Royal Mail and other people. But then again, you know, you can put standard letters out and send them in the post. I don't know if you've got quality assurance in the unit. If you have, then presumably an auditor will be coming in and checking on your response times to communications. And, you know, if you don't meet a certain target, then you're at risk of losing your QA assurance. I don't know whether you've got that or not, but it's something to think about. But my point is, it's not rocket science to communicate with people every week, 2 weeks or 3 weeks, if only to say, we're still here, we're looking at your case, we haven't abandoned you. And that's the point I wanted to make.
Thank you. If there are no further comments, can we have a vote? The recommendation has been moved and seconded. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attendance. The next item on the agenda is item number 6, I think. Strategic Internal Audit Plan, which you have attached on the yellow pages, and there is a recommendation on page 36 that we approve the Strategic Internal Audit Plan, which I'm happy to move.
I'll formally second that and reserve my right to speak.
Any comments or questions? Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, would be happy to support the internal audit strategy and statement that's attached. I just wanted to draw particular attention, and I think it's pertinent given the conversation we've just had, to page 6 of the report, which references the value for money element of audit. And I think particularly that is important. I'll reference what I did earlier, that yesterday a decision was taken to restructure the comms and marketing team, and that obviously identified an over-reliance on agency staff, temporary agency staff. And I think the exact phrase that was used in the report to describe the need to employ those new staff was that the temporary and agency staff were costly and unsustainable for the council. And so particularly supportive of the element around value for money as part of the audit. And we know that that issue in particular is felt in areas like adult social care. We've just heard it in the conversation we've had. So as well as supporting this area, I do think whether this could be taken back through you, Marge, that one of the first areas of focus for internal audit in the year forward might be precisely the point that Councillor Upton has just said. A bit of a closer look around some of the communications and processes in the adult social care team to make sure that there is both value for money that we're receiving, because we need to assure ourselves as that as a committee, but also that processes are in place and the appropriate communication is in place. And as Councillor Upton says, the appropriate mechanisms are in place to make sure that we are, as far as possible, we're never going to eradicate, all complaints. We're never going to eradicate all issues and all errors from the council. But as far as possible, we start to try and slim down the number of investigations. So having said that, Mr. Chairman, I'm supportive of the statement and strategy.
Thank you. We have got Rob Disney listening, and I'm sure you picked that up. Is this some way your internal audit team can help as far as adult social services are concerned? Because I think they do need some help.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Payne, for the point and the question. I think that's a good suggestion. I think it's when we come through not only this strategic audit plan, but when we come through with our termly plans, they always come with an opportunity for members to raise suggestions about areas that internal audit could helpfully provide assurance on, and that's something that I'd happily take forward and build into one of our forthcoming termly plans.
Okay, thank you very much. Yep.
Just wanted to clarify, Councillor Payne, the report that yesterday's Personnel Committee was about the central council comms and marketing function, not about the departmental comms functions. So I just want to be clear they're two separate things, but I think we're clear here. The dialogue we want to have is about the communication between the department and the service users.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Marge. I completely understood that. The point I was making is it referenced the need for replacing temporary and agency staff to provide value for money because they were costly. And the point I'm making here is we need to be assured that in each individual service, over and above that central function, there's both value for money and that processes are being followed.
Yeah, that was speaking that.
Yeah. Fine, thank you. If there are no further comments, can we move to the vote on the report? All those in favour, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. If we can move to item number 7, the internal audit charter refresh. And you've got one recommendation there that the internal audit charter be approved, which I move.
I'll second that recommendation and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Councillor Payne?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, happy to support this. I was particularly pleased, Rob, to see in this report, if this is your work, the reference to the point about potential conflicts of interest. I think we've seen in recent weeks that potential conflicts of interest can damage the reputation of a local authority and a council. And I think that area around perceived conflicts of interest is really, really important. So I was pleased to see that specifically referenced in the report, and more than happy, Mr. Chairman, to support the report under item 7.
Thank you. Rob, is there any comment you want to make on that?
Absolutely great. It strikes exactly to my personal objectivity and that through my through the extended team. So it's something that we're all too aware of. An internal audit is a key requirement of any internal audit section that we act with objectivity and independence. So really guard that carefully, and so I'm really always mindful to bring any potential conflicts of interest to the fore so that everybody's aware of it and of what we're doing to mitigate that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are no further comments, can we move to the vote? All those in favour? That is unanimous again. Thank you very much. If we can move to item number 8, which is the Councillors' Divisional Fund establishment of a working group. I think it's long overdue that we had a look at the Councillors' Divisional Fund. There's often some lack of clarity in what you can or what you should be recommending for award. And I think the whole thing needs tidying up and looking at again. Now, it is a councillors, that means across the whole of the council divisional fund. And so consequently, I think it would be a good idea if we could, and it may only take one meeting, I hope it will, because we have got a fair number of suggestions already that we can put forward. I hope we can have a cross-party working group that can agree to present a unanimous report for recommendation to this committee. And so all we're seeking to do this afternoon is to set up that working group. What I'm suggesting is that it will be Councillor Mox and myself, and one member from the Labour group, one member from the Independent Alliance. And I would have thought we might want to invite Councillor Garner. I know he's the only non-unaligned member now, or whatever he wants to call himself. I don't know, the truly independent. I don't think it's going to be politically contentious. I hope not anyway. So that's my suggestion. So I move the recommendations with those comments.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman, and reserve my right.
Any comments or questions? Councillor Payne?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just support the establishment of the working group. As you said, I think this is a piece of work that's long overdue. I know today isn't a debate about the CDF per se, but I think the point I would just want to impress as a member of this committee, and obviously recommendations will come back here, is that I'm sure all of us agree in this chamber that the primary aim here is to make sure that the funds are going to those people who need it, and that they're distributed in an appropriate and transparent fashion. And I think that has to be the guiding principle for the working group and the recommendations that it brings back. But fully supported the recommendation outlined, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Can I leave the two groups then to let Marge know who their nominees for the working party will be? So I don't see anybody else. Oh, Councillor Butler, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not really for this meeting, but just looking at CDF in general, it's a great thing to do. It's a nice optional thing to do. This council has done for many years, and we're all very grateful. And as indeed the community and beneficiaries are as well. But I'm just I don't know if it's just me, but a little bit concerned. There's seems to be an awful lot of pressure on perhaps one person who administers this scheme, because I don't think I'm alone in this. I've got a few CDF applications going through the system, but they seem to be taking a little bit of a long time. And I'm not sort of proportioning blame, but I'm just worried that there's a little bit of an overload going on, especially at this time of year, because we've all had Christmas events or whatever to support. Some of those events have been and gone now, but we're still waiting for the grants to come through. And I fully appreciate this is discretionary and we're in exceptional times and all the rest of it. But I'm just wondering whether it's also an opportunity to look at the way of working and administering.
So one of the things we're going to propose to you is exactly to deal with that issue. So an online or more automated process, so it'll be slicker and easier to get through quicker. Not preempting the work of the working group, obviously.
But that will be one of the suggestions that are up for discussion. Let's put it like that. We're not going to come with a blank page. I think that would be foolish. So I don't see anyone else. So all those in favour, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the Rushcliff Borough Council Electoral Review Consultation response. And I'm happy to move the recommendation.
I'll second that recommendation.
Thank you very much. I understand that all of the Rushcliff members have been consulted and by and large are unhappy, apart from Councillor Clark, who is now going to voice his displeasure.
I take exception to that, Mr. Chairman. No, there's a couple of points I wanted to mention, but first of all, if I could, possibly on behalf of my other Rushcliff colleagues, thank Jo Toomey very much indeed for the work she's done in interpreting. As you quite rightly said, we were consulted, and I'm afraid that we threw an awful lot of information at Jo Toomey, and she's done incredibly well in interpreting our comments, etc., and pulling all this together. So I do thank her very much for that. But there's just a couple of things, and I note in the report, I can't remember which paragraph it was now, but as we know, the deadline for submission has officially passed, but we were allowed a qualification to say we submitted the draft subject to sort of final confirmation from today. And just one thing, on page 68 of 88, where we talk about the elector ratio, all those comments are quite correct, but I think we finished off by concluding that we believe that the total number of councillors should actually be increased and not remain at 44, because there's an 18% increase in population, and therefore we believe the number of councillors should be increased to reflect a consistent ratio on the workload. And the other point, which again, this is no reflection on Jo Toomey, I think us throwing lots of names of villages at her I think it just needs amending slightly. On page 71, in the East Bridgeford section, first of all, Thoroton is, they're all O's, there isn't an A in Thoroton, but the second paragraph in the brackets, it's just the Flintham area rather than Flintham and Newton. And then in the last section, we weren't suggesting Newton and Saxondale. We were actually suggesting an East Bridgeford ward, and East Bridgeford should be included in that first list. And then the second line should be a Thoroton ward with the deletion of East Bridgeford. And then that brings it into line geographically on the west and the east side of the A46. So if you like, they're sort of, whether you want to class them as typographical, Mr. Chairman, or whatever, but it just needs to make sure that detail is correct. But again, to thank Joe Toomey for spending an awful lot of time for interpreting our comments, which we threw at her like a machine gun, I'm afraid. So, apart from that, they're fine. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Joe, is there any comment you would wish to make on that? And you've done a jolly good job if you've kept the Rushcliff members happy, as you seem to have done by and large, apart from Councillor Clark. And I've not yet known anyone keep him happy.
Thank you, Chair. Anything further to add? We can update the template to capture the comments that Councillor Clark's just made, and then we'll get that submitted to the Boundary Commission and confirm that, subject to the committee's approval today, as our final response as a council.
I spoke too soon. Councillor Butler's put his hand up.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Chairman. It's a very minor point, verging on the point of being pedantic, but there we are. Also on page 71, it's a typo. That's all it is. On the Cockgrave section, where it refers to bringing in Normanton on the Wolds and Clipstone. For the sake of accuracy, it's actually Clipstone without the E, but we also need to stick in the on the Wolds bit. So Clipstone on the Wolds, because we don't want people to start thinking that Clipstone up in Mansfield is suddenly moving into Rushcliff. Yeah, I mean, I know it's a boundary review, but that would be a bit excessive. But also just to echo Councillor Clark's comment that Sir Joe did a superb job. She gathered it all together, and we were all bombarding her with our various suggestions, some of which were perhaps less than helpful, because you know what we're like. And but no, it's a good job, and it'll be interesting to see what notice the powers that be take of our feedback, but that's for another place.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. I can't imagine anyone ever calling you pedantic. Many other things, but never pedantic. Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wouldn't deem to be as knowledgeable about Rushcliff's geography as Councillor Clark and Councillor Butler, so I'm not going to make any specific points about the communities within the review. Firstly, just say thank you to you, Joe. I know, having gone through this process at Gedling and at the county, just how difficult these issues are, and you know, congratulations to you for steering colleagues through consultation response. Councillor Clark answered my first question, which was why we've got a report on the committee that's a couple of days after the close of the consultation, but I think Councillor Clark's satisfied about the Commission being open to tweaking, following today. Just one presentational point, Joe, and then one broader point, if I may, and I'm sure I'll be shot down by members to the right of me if they don't agree with the point I made. But the first presentational point on page 67 of the County Council pack, I think it is, which is effectively the front cover sheet of the consultation response, Joe. Just presentationally, the second paragraph on the right flows from the first paragraph on the left, but if you weren't aware of that, you could read that paragraph as being member wards are not held by. So just presentationally, I think that you know, we just need to sort of tidy that up. The broader point I just wanted to make, and I made this point in our own review, and I know this is a view held by one of our members who does represent one of the divisions that is affected by this review, is there's a reference, Joe, about 3-member wards at the end of the paragraph that says there is some acknowledgement that in some urban areas where there are large communities and few distinct boundaries, 3-member wards may be necessary. That kind of left me quite puzzled, because it sort of strikes me as being a bit of a statement that if we're not careful, it's kind of sitting on the fence but leaning in one direction. And I have to say that I've always found it a bit odd that you would treat urban areas and rural areas differently in relation to multi-member wards. You can have a debate, I think, until the cows come home about whether you agree with 3-member wards or not. And there will be people in this chamber who have different views about that. But I do just find it odd that we would be supporting, as a county council, which seems to be what we're suggesting in that paragraph, supporting treating urban areas differently to rural areas in terms of multi-member wards. And I'm just nervous about that, because in the not only my own views, but in the conversations I've had with our county councillor, who is affected and referenced in this report as being affected, who represents an urban area, you know, she is categorically against the idea of treating urban areas in a different way to rural areas in terms of multi-member wards, notwithstanding, as I say, the individual arguments people might have about their pros or cons. So I'm just nervous about that language, because it's like we're suggesting that it's appropriate to treat urban areas different to rural areas, and I'm a bit uncomfortable about that as a committee member. So I'm not sort of seeking to undermine Rushcliff members, you know, or my own members, but I'm both voicing a concern about our individual elected member and my own concern about where that leaves the county council. It seems like we're taking a view on something that I'm not really sure we should be taking a view on. So I'm sorry to sort of throw a curveball, Joe, on this, but I'm getting some nods from the right of me. I'm not sure whether everybody agrees. And if there is agreement, I think we just need to find appropriate wording that doesn't leave us looking like we're suggesting something that maybe we're not, if you see what I mean. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, to throw a curveball.
Councillor Clark, did you indicate?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I understand what Councillor Payne's saying, but just hopefully by way of some form of explanation, I think the main concern was that in multi-member wards within urban areas, it's a much tighter, confined area, whereas rural areas, if you had a multi-member ward, it's very spread out, and so the representation on lots of different parish councils then becomes very sparse and very difficult to sort of work. So it was just trying to have that differentiation, that it was better to have smaller geographical rural areas with lesser members, or even a single member, rather than trying to have multi-member covering a massive geographical area, where the public it was about public expectation, because public expectation would be is, well, you know, Councillor X never turned up to our parish council meetings, but that's because they might have agreed between them that Councillor Y does those parishes and Councillor X does those parishes. But the public won't know that, and therefore they will deem people, councillors perhaps, to be not bothered, and therefore didn't attend. Whereas with an urban area, it's probably easier to represent that smaller, tighter geographical area. But
Councillor Payne?
I don't know whether this is helpful or not, and Joe may advise us. And again, I don't want to look like I'm questioning individual members' geography. I understand absolutely, and I actually support the point Councillor Clark makes. In reading it, I sort of think we make the point powerfully enough about rural wards in the front end of the paragraph. We say that actually, and I agree with Neil, there's concerns about multi-member wards and attending parish councils, and then who's responsible, and if you don't respond as the member of public, then criticise you. And my own division is both rural and urban. So I've got a parish council, so I absolutely support the points Councillor Clark makes. I just wonder whether we need those final two or final sentence. We make a really strong point in the front end about rural wards and about the parishes. Do we need to say that final sentence that, as I say, just muddies the waters a bit for me about drawing conclusions about urban wards that I'm not necessarily sure are true or reflective? So could we not just delete that final sentence and leave the point that Councillor Clark makes, which is made in that first paragraph under the section 3-member wards, that where it powerfully makes the point that actually in rural areas where you've got multiple parish councils, multi-member wards might not be the appropriate solution. So just deleting the sentence rather than trying to find if that found favour with people, because I wholeheartedly support the point that Councillor Clark just made.
I think in that last point, and it's been going through my mind as well, in a larger urban area, the boundaries are sometimes difficult to draw. I remember when Hucknall for the county council used to be a 3-member division because they thought it was too difficult to draw the boundaries. That's changed now, of course. So I just wonder if that has some part to play. Joe, do you want to comment on that?
Only really to say that we're in the hands of however members would prefer to articulate it. And certainly the comments that have been made today are the comments that were made during the various interactions with all the Rushcliff members. So it's just about the best way of capturing them that represents the views as best as possible.
Yeah. I'm happy to take that out if other members are happy with that.
I mean, Chairman, I don't just try and be helpful, and Councillor Payne's just whispered across. I think we're quite relaxed whether it's in or out, but Councillor Payne just suggested just delete the last 6 words after the comma.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Let's compromise then. If we're all in agreement, take out, put a full stop after boundaries, and leave it at that. Can we do that? Yeah. Okay. Are we in agreement with that? Okay. So with that minor amendment, can we have a show of hands in favour of the recommendations? That is unanimous again. Thank you very much. And the next item, Basset Law Community Governance Review, and I do hope we're not going to get into a detailed discussion of this. I'm moving the recommendation, and you can see the recommendation is to approve the letter to be sent by the Chief Executive, basically to tell Basset Law to get on with it, and we have no wish to interfere whatsoever. So I'll move the recommendation.
I'll definitely second that one.
Thank you. If there are no comments, can we move to the vote? All those in favour? That's unanimous again. Thank you. The last item on the agenda is the work programme, which I'm happy to move. Any comments or questions? No. All those in favour of the work programme? That is unanimous again, I think. And that draws the meeting to a close. Thank you for your attendance. I hope Santa calls, and I wish you all a Merry Christmas.